Hey everyone, welcome to our lesson on connotation and denotation. So you might be watching this lesson as part of our word parts unit, or you might be watching this lesson as part of your author's purpose unit. Connotation is something that belongs in both places, so you may see this lesson more than once. So for today's lesson, you are going to make sure you have a pen or a pencil, something to write with. You need paper or wherever you have been keeping your notes, preferably in a notebook. And you're also going to need your vocabulary tracker because we're going to be adding in 2 new vocabulary words today. All right, let's get started. So, what GED skill will we be practicing today? This lesson is primarily part of our word parts unit, so our GED skill focuses on word parts. The skill that we've been practicing is the ability to determine the meaning of words and phrases as they're used in a text, and that includes determining connotative and figurative meanings from context. So, along with this lesson, we have also practiced finding the meaning of words and phrases as they're used in a text, and those were through our lessons on word parts and context clues. And we also have a lesson on figurative language. That lesson is the figurative language lesson. So for the other 3 main parts of this GED skill, you're going to want to look for the words parts lesson, the context clues lesson, and the figurative language lesson. Today, we're primarily going to be working with this idea of determining connotative meaning. So by the end of the lesson today, we're going to be able to do 2 things. We are going to be able to identify the differences between connotation and denotation. And we're going to be able to read a passage and identify the connotation that is used inside of that passage. We know it is really important for us to understand the things that we are reading. So being able to understand both what the words mean literally and figuratively and understand what their connotative meaning is very important for us as a reader. So let's go ahead and get started. We are going to be adding 2 new vocabulary words to our tracker today. We are going to be adding in the words connotation and denotation. So make sure you have these written down, and we're going to go ahead and talk about what the definitions to these 2 words are in just a few minutes. And just like always, when we stop for these vocabulary words, feel free to pause the video so you have a chance to write down the definitions. All right, so before we actually get going into the definitions of connotation and denotation, we're going to play a little game of Would You Rather. So Would You Rather asks you to choose between 2 things and decide which one you would rather do. So I'm going to be changing that game a little bit, and I want to play What Would You Rather Be? So I have 4 different groupings of words here, and I want you to think of which one you would rather be described as. So our first box here, we have the words assertive or bossy. So I want to know, would you rather be assertive or would you rather be bossy? In my second box, we have the words conceited or self-confident. Which would you rather be, conceited or self-confident? We have workaholic or hardworking. What would you rather be described as? And lastly, we have stubborn or determined. Which of these do you think your friends would describe you as? So pause the video here and decide which 4 words you think best identify you, or which 4 words you think your friends would most likely associate with you. Okay, so I'm going to kind of talk about myself and how I see myself with these. So we've got assertive or bossy. Well, I know that when someone is bossy, they give people directions, but they can be kind of mean about it, and they're always doing it. They are always trying to be the one in charge, and it just kind of is not a good thing. Whereas assertive means that I'm taking charge, but I'm doing it in a positive way. I'm standing up for myself, and I'm making sure I'm heard. So I think I would rather be known as assertive. Conceited or self-confident? Okay, well, when someone is conceited, that means that they are really comfortable and confident with themselves, but that they also feel that they're better than the people around them. And I don't feel that way. Self-confident, on the other hand, means that I'm confident in my abilities and confident about how I handle things. I think that I would rather be described as self-confident. Workaholic or hardworking? Okay, I know that when I see this ending, a holic to something, It just means a person who is suffering with an addiction. So a workaholic is a person who is addicted to work. We could also say like an alcoholic is a person who is addicted to alcohol. And we can even have fun with this and say that if you are a cakeaholic, you are addicted to cake. You know, we can use this word in fun to make fun of something, as well as in its serious meaning. I don't necessarily think I'm addicted to work, so I don't think I'm a workaholic. I do think that I am hardworking though. I make sure that I am giving 100% every time that I am working. I make sure that I am trying to do the best of my ability whenever I am at work. So I think hardworking could be used to describe me. Okay, lastly, stubborn or determined. I think this one would depend on who you ask. So some people, like my mom, she might say that I am stubborn, but I think most people would say that I am determined. So when you're determined, it means that you are just really focused on getting things done. You are focused on finishing, doing the best that you can, versus if something is stubborn, it's just kind of that refusal to let something go. You're always going to want to be focusing on it. So I think determined better fits me. When we look at these words, each pair is paired on purpose. So for example, workaholic and hardworking. Both of these words really mean that you just work a lot. You spend a lot of time at work, you focus on your work, you are good at what you do, you're hardworking. When we talk about the difference between them, the difference is quite small. I only know that the difference here is that one of these seems like a bad thing. Right? It seems like a bad thing to be a workaholic, and hardworking sounds like a good thing. And I actually think we could do that for all of our word lists here. So for example, the words bossy, conceited, stubborn, and workaholic all have these kind of negative qualities to it. We don't necessarily want to be associated or known as someone who is conceited. We don't want to be known as someone who is bossy. So when we talk about words that we're using, words are used to show feeling. And we know that words can really help us interpret how an author feels. So choosing words on purpose really makes a difference. If you're choosing something to show a positive meaning, you want to choose a positive word. If you are choosing something that has a negative meaning, you want to choose a negative word. And what this boils down to is that this kind of comes down to our definitions of denotation and connotation. So let's get some good definitions for those before we go forward. Okay, so first thing we're going to look at is denotation. So denotation, here's our definition. Denotation is the literal dictionary definition of a word. Feel free to pause the video here and get your definition from the screen. When we say that it is the literal dictionary definition, all that we mean is that if you were to look up a word in the dictionary, its meaning is its denotation. And the way I remember this is that the D's go together. So a dictionary and denotation both start with the letter D. So I just remember the denotation is from the dictionary. I know it seems like a simple trick, but you know me, I'm all about simple ways to remember things. So denotation is your dictionary. So let's look at how this works with two of our words from the previous screen. So we have the words determined and stubborn. In the dictionary, determined is defined as being decided, settled, or resolved, meaning that you have made a firm opinion, you are determined, you are going to finish it, everything is kind of done and finished. When something is stubborn, we say that it is fixed or set in purpose or opinion, meaning that your ideas aren't going to change. That sounds really similar to something that is decided or resolved. Those share similar meanings. The only difference really comes is with the idea that stubborn means that you are unreasonably unwilling to change. And the idea that you are unwilling, you are not going to try it, that's kind of what gives us our negative feel for this word. So a lot of times when we have similar words like this, their denotations will be similar. So determined and stubborn aren't exactly the same, but they are close enough. They have similar meanings. So their denotation is similar to one another. Now, when we talk about connotation, on the other hand, connotation is different from denotation in the way that we interpret the word. So our definition for connotation is the ideas and feelings that come to mind when people read or hear a word. So these are kind of like opinions because they are the feelings that we get when we hear a word. So if the denotation is your dictionary definition, your connotation is the way that word makes me feel, the way I feel about a word. And we can feel a couple of different ways about words that we hear. We can feel good about them, we could feel bad about them, or we could just read them and not really care and have no opinion. So let's look at how the connotation changes for two words that are very similar, determined and stubborn. So when we look at determined has positive feelings associated with it. It shows that someone is a hard worker and will do what is needed to get the job done. I'm seeing that these things are part of being determined. So when I see that word determined, I feel positively about it. So if we look at an example sentence, I might read, I am determined to pass this test. It makes me feel like I can do it, I'm going to work hard to do it, and I'm going to make sure I do everything I can to be successful. Now, if we look at stubborn, on the other hand, stubborn has negative feelings associated with it. I don't necessarily feel the same way about the word stubborn. Stubborn shows me that someone is unwilling to bend or change their ideas. So when I think of stubborn, I actually think of kids. Kids can be very stubborn. If they want something, they refuse to stop asking. And we would say, oh, you are being very stubborn, not determined. If we look at an example sentence, we're going to see that the information changes. Jason is so stubborn. He refused to ask for help even though he knows he needs it. So in our first sentence here, we have a really positive feeling. And in my second sentence, we have a pretty negative feeling. The words stubborn and determined, even though they mean the same thing, can't really be replaced in these sentences. I can't say something like, I am stubborn to pass this test. That doesn't quite work. And I could say, Jason is so determined, but that doesn't make sense with the rest of the sentence. He refuses to ask for help even though he needs it. That's not being determined, that's being stubborn. So when we look at the two sentences, we can't switch the words around because of their connotation. Their connotation changes the way those sentences read. All right, let's do a little bit of practice here. And before we get into that practice, I do want to mention positive, negative, and neutral here. So a word's connotation can be positive, negative, or neutral. When something is positive, we know it's a good. And I generally kind of use that plus sign there as a way to tell me that something is positive. When something is negative, we know it is bad. So I'm going to use that minus sign to show me that it is negative. And we also have the word neutral. So neutral has two different meanings to it, and it kind of depends on what's around the sentence. A neutral word can be a word that is neither good nor bad. So it has no meaning to it. It just is a word. Or it could be a word that is seen both ways. When you look at that word, it sometimes can be positive and it sometimes can be negative, depending on how the word is used, depending on the context around that word, and depending on what the author is trying to say. So let's look at some examples of how these positive, negative, and neutral words work. Down here, I have the same sentence written three different ways using three different vocabulary words. So my sentence is talking about Thomas, and I'm going to say that running every day has made Thomas something. In my first sentence, we see that running every day has made Thomas slender and lithe. In my second sentence, we see that running every day has made Thomas thin. And in my third, running every day has made Thomas scrawny. So slender, lithe, thin, and scrawny are all synonyms for one another. They all mean essentially the same thing. What that means is that they have similar denotations. Their dictionary definitions are similar to one another. What they do not have is similar connotations. They have very different connotations. So what I want you to do, I would like for you to pause the video here and decide which of these three sentences is positive, which of these three sentences is negative, and which of these sentences could be neutral. All right, so let's look at our first sentence. Running every day has made Thomas slender and lithe. Okay, well, let's talk about what slender and lithe mean. When I think of someone who is lithe, I think of a swimmer or a runner, two athletes who are usually very, very skinny, very thin, but they are very muscular. They have strong muscles to be able to compete in their activities. Slender just means that someone is small and shapely. And I don't mean small as in like height, I mean small as in size. So slender and lithe sound pretty good to me. So I'm going to go ahead and label these as my positive sentence. Slender and lithe are positive. Let's look at our sentence. Second sentence. Running every day has made Thomas thin. Okay, thin. When I think of thin, I think of it two ways. I think it depends on how you say the word thin. If someone is working hard to lose weight and they have lost a lot of weight and you want to be supportive, you might say, oh my gosh, you look so thin. And you say it in such a way that is positive and encouraging. The other way that I could think of using the word thin is if someone is already very small and they've lost a lot of weight and you're worried about them, you might change the way you say that sentence and say, are you okay? You're very thin, very concerned. I'm worried about you. So depending on how we say that sentence, I think that this could go either positive or negative. So since it can go either way, this is a sentence that shows me that something is neutral. I need the other things around it. I need other sentences to be able to decide whether or not the author wants me to think positively or if they want me to think negatively. Okay, last one. Running every day has made Thomas scrawny. So we know that we already have a positive and a neutral sentence. So this sentence has to be negative, but let's figure out why. When we think about slender and lithe, we said that those things are generally more positive ideas. But when someone is scrawny, scrawny tends to make me think of someone who is weak and small. So someone who has gone through a growth spurt and they haven't kind of filled out their body yet might be scrawny. If you are a superhero fan, if you watched the movie Captain America, before he becomes Captain America, we could say his character is a little scrawny. He doesn't have a lot of muscles. So when we look at our words here, what I really want to point out is that some words we know automatically if they are positive or negative. Some words could be either positive or negative, and it depends on the rest of the sentence for us to be able to decide what they actually are. So we're going to do another practice with these positive and negative words. Okay, so here I have 10 sets of words, and I want to decide which of the words that we're looking at are positive words or positive phrases, and which of the words we are looking at are negative words or negative phrases. So each pair of words will be next to each other. So these are a pair, these are a pair, these are a pair, these are a pair, and these are a pair. What I want you to do is I want you to pause the video, and on a separate sheet of paper, I want you to make a list of which phrases you think are the positive connotation phrases and which ones are the negative connotation phrases. All right, so hopefully you have taken some time and separated these into their positive and negative sides. So let's take a minute and talk where they go. Okay, so our first two, we have a powerful stink versus a powerful aroma. Well, I think a powerful stink is definitely going to be my negative idea because when I think of stink, I think of things like skunks or garbage. When I see a powerful aroma, I think that one's my positive thing because when I think of things that have aromas, I think of nice things, good things like flowers and perfume and food. Food has lovely aromas. How about our next one? A dynamic leader versus a pushy leader. Well, I definitely think that a dynamic leader is a positive thing. To be dynamic means that people are interested in following you and they want to follow you. Versus a pushy leader, I definitely think that that is negative. We don't want to be pushy when we want to be a leader. How about answered with arrogance versus answered with confidence? Well, arrogance reminds me a lot of that word conceited. You feel that you're really good at something and you're kind of better than other people. So to me, that feels more along our negative side. Answering with confidence means that you just feel confident with your answer, but you don't feel better than other people. So I think that's definitely positive. How about sloppy clothes versus comfortable clothes? Well, if something is sloppy, it means it's kind of messy and not really put together well. So I think that's probably my negative, especially when I think of comfortable. Comfortable is definitely a good thing. It comes from that word comfort, so it's positive. Lastly, we have spent his money versus squandered his money. Well, everyone has to spend money. So that to me, I guess, is going to be my positive, especially when I look at its opposite when I think of squandering money. Squandering money means that you're really wasting that money. So I think that's definitely more of a negative feeling. Now, just like with anything, these positive and negative feelings can change. It just depends on the context around it. So let's do one more practice. Okay, so here I have the words cheap, frugal, miserly, and economical. I want to know what you think. When you watch this lesson, I want you to send me a remind message or an email and let me know what you think. Which of these words is positive? Which of these words is negative? And which of these words could be neutral, depending on what you think. So in your email or in your message, you can go ahead and tell me, I think cheap is blank. I think frugal is blank. Let me know what you think about these. I'm not going to give you the answers until you send me your message. Alrighty, so let's finish this guy up by doing a couple of examples to show you how context works with our connotations. So we're going to read two reading passages, and we're going to look to identify the positive and negative words inside of each. So here's our first reading. Mr. Smith has been a valuable employee since the company started. During that time, he has expressed many strong opinions that have influenced the company. His methods of solving problems are sometimes unusual. In short, he is a real leader. And what I want to know is which of these words has a positive connotation and which of these words has a negative connotation. So let's start with those positive words first. Okay, I'm going to use a blue color here to show positive. So which words do I think are positive? Okay, well, something is valuable. That's definitely a positive for me. If someone is a real leader, I think that one is definitely a positive sign for me. What about ideas like strong opinions and influenced? Well, I think that could go either way. It could be positive or negative, right? Because you could be a positive influence or you can be a negative influence. You can have strong opinions that are good or strong opinions that are bad. So I think that could go either way. The same thing with this word unusual. It could be positive or it could be negative, depending on what I'm trying to say here. So let's think about where I might find this reading. This is talking to me about Mr. Smith as an employee. So I might use this as an evaluation. Or maybe I'm writing him a letter of recommendation, something to tell information about him. In those cases, I probably want to be using these things as good things. So I think that strong opinions, influenced, and unusual are good things. I don't really see any negative things in here, just things that could be positive or neutral. So once I've kind of identified my words and how they work, they help me to answer my next question. What is the overall connotation of this passage? And we have the options of positive, negative, neutral, or there is no connotation. So because I found mostly positive and neutral words, those neutral words came out to be positive here. I think my answer is going to be that the connotation of this passage is positive. It makes me feel good about Mr. Smith as an employee. He's someone that the company needs and looks forward to having. So this passage has an overall connotation of positive. Let's do one more. Okay. I was shocked to get a birthday gift from my aunt because she is usually so cheap. When I tore the gaudy paper off the package, I saw a scarf made from flimsy material. It was covered with busy embroidery and flashy sequins. It certainly was a strange present. Okay, pause the video and go ahead and look for those positive and negative words for connotation. Write down any words that you think are positive and write down anything that you think is negative. If a word could be neutral, try to decide which place it belongs in this paragraph. Okay, so I'm going to use a pretty yellow color here, and I'm going to start looking for positive ideas. Okay, well, a birthday gift is a good thing, so I'm going to put that as a positive. A present is a good thing, and I think that's really all the positive things that I see. So let's talk about negative words. Well, shock, you can have a good shock or a bad shock because that could be either way. Cheap is another word that I think we could be positive or negative. Gaudy paper. Generally, gaudy is definitely a negative word. Flimsy material. Well, flimsy material for a scarf may not be such a good thing. Busy embroidery and flashy sequins. The way these are being described, I kind of get the impression that these are negative things. So with my neutral words like shocked and cheap, I think that we're probably meaning these to be a negative feeling. So overall, I'm seeing a lot of negatives with just a little bit of positivity in here. So what does that tell us that the overall connotation is? Is that overall connotation going to be positive, negative, or neutral? When I read this, since we saw an overwhelming amount of negative words, some neutral words and some positive words, I think it's pretty safe to say that our answer is that the overall connotation of this passage is negative. We have that negative feeling to this. All right. So what I want you to keep in mind is that as we talk about word usage, connotation, and denotation, it's important to look at context. We need to look at not just the words themselves and how the words themselves make me feel, but how those words make me feel around other things. The connotation of a word can change depending on its context. And that's why we deal with this with our word usage unit, is because it's important to look at the words by themselves and the words as a whole. In terms of author's purpose, connotation can be a signal to us that the author is trying to explain something that they feel positively about by using positive words. If the author feels negatively about something, they're going to use negative words to explain it. So we can use the connotation of the words and phrases inside of a reading to help us understand author's point of view as well. All right, everyone, your homework is up on Google Classroom and with everything. If you have questions, you can email me, remind message me, or give me a phone call and I will be more than glad to help. All right, everyone, good luck and I'll see you next time.